friends, I'm Kyla and welcome back to the Infinite Library, and today we're going to do a video that I have been somewhat prepping for basically for the whole of this year. Love it or hate it, everyone kind of knows, if you're in the bookish community, that during the month of November everyone is kind of obsessed with the Goodreads Choice Awards. It is essentially a big old popularity vote on Goodreads and have a load of books in different categories, and you can vote on them in terms of the genre and what your favourite is. There is definitely an awful lot of skewing towards certain authors and certain books that we've seen throughout the previous years. But even though I think it's kind of like a bit of a silly awards thing, and a lot of people really dislike it, particularly when they've been doing as they've done in previous years, where they've been missing out certain categories, I still think it's a really interesting thing to examine. I always think it's also a really good way to maybe find out what books are kind of popular in genres maybe you're not reading. It's a good way to find books that are, you know, books that you've not heard of, and it does actually give me like quite a lot to add to my TBR list, to be honest. So last year, I did a video where I predicted what I thought was going to be in the fantasy and horror genres. I wasn't really too familiar with the other genres, so I just stuck to those two because they're my primary reading genres. And the results were interesting. Basically, I discovered that I was kind of way off in terms of fantasy, although that was also really because they added in a category which I wasn't expecting, which was romantasy, which I am incorporating into my predictions for this year. I do think they're going to include romantasy again because there is just so much romantasy, and honestly it does help to split it out from fantasy. So that threw me off, so I was very off course basically with my fantasy predictions. I was, however, quite on it with my horror predictions, so that was nice to see. So this year I'm basically going to do the same thing again. My primary focus is going to be fantasy and horror. I have the most recommendations for those, but I've just gradually been gathering like various other predictions for the other genres as well. So you're going to see me adding in some bonus predictions for basically all the other genres that is probably going to be in the awards. So I guess without further ado, let us get into it. So I've just got my laptop here because I just want to show you guys the rules and eligibility to be included in the Goodreads Awards. These are the rules from last time, but it does actually also tell you the dates for when the 2024 one will be coming and like what books are kind of going to be applicable in those dates, because they have to be released within a certain time period to be in this. Usually the opening round is sometime in November. I'm going to guess it's probably fairly similar to how it was last year, and that is going to be November the 14th to the 26th. This is 20 books in around 15 genres. I don't know if they're still going to do that this year or they might change it up again. I know people really wanted them to have middle grade and poetry back in, so we'll see if they actually listen to that and they put it back in again. I've just kind of gone with the assumption that they're not. Also, graphic novel was missing, which I was very also upset about. So I've kind of gone with the assumption at the moment that they've not, just because we don't know what categories there are, but I am hopeful that they will be in there. So that is the opening round. That is 20 books for each of the genres, and then it goes into a final round, November the 28th to December the 3rd. Rough dates again, this is just last year's dates. And this basically narrows it down to 10 books for each genre, and then the final vote from that is the winner. So, in terms of eligibility, they have to be books published in the United States, in English, including works in translation and other significant re-releases, and then it's the dates. So for the 2024 awards, that has to be that books published between the November the 16th, 2023 and November the 12th, 2024. At the time of me filming this, it is currently the 10th of October. So I am going to anticipate a couple of other books that have yet to come out yet, which currently have a high rating, which I think still have a good chance of being in the running for this. But I could be way off because I don't know how their releases are going to go, essentially. So that is the general criteria. 20 books each category. The average rating of all of the official nominees has to be a 3.5 or higher at the time of launch on Goodreads. So I've gone through today and I've checked all of my predictions to see if they are still above 3.5. Some are worryingly close to that borderline and could drop and be totally off the running basically, and some are already off the running, so that'll be interesting. I do often see that a lot of newer releases tend to skew towards higher ratings, so I will not be surprised if we see some of these new releases that came out in like September, October, even in beginning of November, which could still make it into this category. A book may be nominated in no more than one genre category. Book can also be nominated in the debut novel category, which if you've seen my recent videos, you've probably seen that basically, that it can be. That's the only category where you can have the book twice. Only one book in a series may be nominated per category. An author may receive multiple nominations within a single category if he or she has more than one eligible series or more than one eligible standalone book. We definitely saw this last year because I believe we had 3 books by Jennifer L. Armentrout in the Romantasy category. The only bit of information here is just saying that they've added Romantasy and they're not doing children, middle grade, poetry and graphic novels, so that it keeps it to 15 categories. I don't know if they're going to reduce any categories. The only category I can maybe see them getting rid of is, I would like maybe for them to see them merging history and non-fiction, because I feel like there's so much crossover between those two, and also honestly a lot of history was memoirs last year. So I'd be interested to see if they merge those categories, and then maybe we can get back one of these other categories. So yeah, that is basically it. So now we can get on to the actual books themselves. So of course, because I am who I am, we're going to start with the one that I have the most predictions for, and that is for fantasy. This is for the straightforward fantasy, which is for adults. The YA fantasy have their own category, and I do have predictions for those as well. So for fantasy, at current, I have 22 predictions of what could make it in here, and I will try and remember to like basically narrow it down to what I suspect is going to be top 10 and maybe the winner. Not necessarily what I would choose to be the winner of the top 10, but what I've kind of just seen has been popular, has a high rating, that kind of thing. So I've got more than is in the category, so obviously not all of these are going to make it, and I could be, like I was last year, way off base. Other things I will mention for this, a couple of books just missed out on being eligible. They were sort of in the between stage of last year and this year, I think, and they weren't in last year, so they just missed out. So Iron Flame, which is the second book in the Fourth Wing series, which actually it would be in the Romantasy category, not the fantasy, so I'm already in the wrong section here. But Iron Flame actually just missed out on eligibility because it was the second book in a series and Fourth Wing came out the same year, and it obviously had the higher rating. It just missed out because it was published November the 7th of 2023, so just before the cut-off date basically, so that isn't going to be in here. Also, Brandon Sanderson, we all know him, we all love him in the world of fantasy. He is missing out on this as well because his book The Sunlit Man came out in October last year, and they picked Trust of the Emerald Sea for his book in the fantasy category, and his next book isn't coming out until December, which is Wind and Truth. I think it's Stormlight Archive, I can't quite remember, but basically he's just missing out on this altogether. So there's going to be no Brandon Sanderson predictions in this. As you probably just noticed, there is potentially going to be some crossover between Romantasy. I've tried to make sure all of these books are like for an audience, not YA, but I was thrown off by this last year too, so we'll see, I guess. And I'll also just mention that as much as I would love for some of the books to be in here, there are probably going to be a couple that I personally love which are likely just going to miss out. For example, one of these being The Honey Witch. I do think it deserves to be in here. I don't think it's going to be in here, sadly. I think it's just not popular enough. And I also think there is always kind of a skew in all these categories, apart from within the YA categories, that we don't have much in the way of LGBT representation. And I'm kind of expecting to see that again. I've tentatively added a few LGBTQ books within the Romantasy category and some of the others, but honestly, I don't expect to see them because given what we saw last year in the Romantasy category, it was predominantly white, straight romances. So yeah, that's a thing. I wish it wasn't. I'd really like them to have some more diverse picks next year, but it is what it is, unfortunately. So yeah, but I put in some hopeful predictions anyway, just in case we actually do get a little bit more in terms of variation in that category. So anyway, on with the actual picks. These are in no particular order, by the way. I will kind of pick out which ones I think are the best but I've just basically put these in a random order. And some of these I actually have physical copies for, so let's go through those first. So the first one I have is one that I personally really love, and I would love to see it in here. I don't know if it's gotten enough hype, unfortunately, but that is Voyage of the Damned by Frances White. This is currently, at the moment, as at the time I'm filming this, the 10th of October, sitting at a 4 rating on Goodreads, so it's definitely eligible. It came out in like January, I think. This is a LGBT murder mystery fantasy set on a boat. It's great. Would love to see it in these awards. I just don't know if it's had as much hype as I would like to have seen it have to be in these awards. But it did get a special edition. I did also notice last year that an awful lot of books in the fantasy categories were ones that had received special editions from book boxes such as Fairy Loot and Illumicrate. So I put a couple in. I've not put them all in, but I put in a few that I think may show up, and I'm probably expecting to see a couple of others that I've not put in show up. But this did get a special edition from Illumicrate, I think. So yeah, I'm hoping this will make it in. Then we have the sequel. Sequels generally always do good in the awards because they tend to rate higher than the first books because they've already got an established audience. So we have the second book in the Emily Wilde series, Emily Wilde Map of the Otherlands. I really enjoyed this one. I gave it a 4. I liked it basically as much as the first book in the series. I think it's still been getting a lot of hype. It's currently set at a 4.31 on Goodreads. I think it's definitely going to be in here. Then we have a book that I don't have a physical copy of, and it is The Familiar by Leigh Bardugo. This is a fantasy set in like the Spanish Inquisition kind of time period, I believe. I may have got that wrong. I read it a few months ago. I personally didn't really love this book. I gave it a 3-star. It was fine. But I am expecting to see it in this category because it's Leigh Bardugo's newest book, and she has generally often been in the fantasy category for these awards, and she won last year with Hellbent. So I am expecting to see it in these awards. It's currently sat at 3.81, so actually not a very high rating compared to some of the other books. With that rating, I'm not expecting it to win. Next, this one is a bit of a wild card. I don't know if this is going to make it in or not. It's currently sat at 3.64, so you could definitely dip down below the line. But it's an established author, and it's been read a lot. I just don't know if it's been liked enough. So I personally really liked it, though. It's Evocation by St. Gibson. This is a urban fantasy, polyamorous book, basically about a guy who's made a deal with the devil, and the devil is coming to collect, and they have to try and find a way out of this curse. Really enjoyed it. I thought it was good. It might not be my favourite St. Gibson, but I think it probably does have a place on this list. But it's not sitting too high. It could definitely drop down a little bit. But it is Halloween season. I feel like a lot of people might pick this up at Halloween season, and that could skew the rating higher or lower, basically. So we'll see. This might not make it in here. Then we have Ava Reid's new book, Lady Macbeth. She came quite high, I think, in the YA fantasy category last year, The Study in Drowning. So I do think her latest book is going to make it in here. I've seen a lot of hype for it. I've not seen many people reading it, though. It's currently sat at a 3.55, so it is just there on the borderline. I don't know if it's going to make it. I've not read it yet myself, so I don't know if I think it deserves to be in here or not, but I do think it will at least make an appearance if it manages to keep itself above 3.5. Next, this book is a shoo-in. It's definitely going to be here. It's probably going to win the fantasy category, to be honest, and that is Somewhere Beyond the Sea by TJ Klune. It is a sequel to The House on the Cerulean Sea, which has loads of people love it. I haven't got to it yet, but I know loads of people love it. Loads of people have been anticipating this sequel. It just came out a few weeks ago, I think, and it's sat at 4.39, which is really high. I think this is the highest rated book possibly on this list. Actually, no, I've got another one here that is higher, but I think it's a shoo-in. If not for the winner, it's going to be in the top 10, probably the top 5. Next, we have a book that I feel like should have got more hype than it has done, but it's still sat at a good rating. It came out back in January, I think, so I think people may have forgotten this, but it is The Book of Doors by Gareth Brown. I really enjoyed this one. I thought this was really good. I've just not seen many people talking about it, but it has currently still sitting at a 4.04 rating, which is really good. So I'd like to see this on here. I just don't know if it's had enough popularity for it to be on here, so we'll see. Next, we have another sequel, so it's likely to do well. The first book was on the awards last year. with God Killer. So this is Sunbringer by Hannah Kaner. This is the second book in the series. I've not heard many people talking about it, but I've heard a lot of people reading God Killer, and I assume then going to pick up the sequel. It's currently set at 3.93, so fairly decent. I don't think it's going to drop too much before the actual awards are released. So yeah, I think this is probably going to be in here. This is a epic fantasy about gods and stuff, basically, and about someone who kills gods. And it was really interesting. I really enjoyed the first book. I just haven't got around to the second one yet. Next, I am fully expecting us to see, as we did last year, some mythology retellings. I haven't put many on this list because I don't think many have really stuck out for me this year. But I have put one in, and that is Hera. Let me check who that's by because I don't remember. Okay, yeah, so Hera is by Jennifer Saint, who has definitely written other things before in this spectrum. I think she was probably in there last year as well. Okay, it's currently sat at a 3.66 though, so it's a little rough. I don't know if it's gonna make it in or not, but I think it is probably the one that's got a good chance to make it in. In terms of other ones, if I had to pick one more, I guess Media by Rosie Hewlett may make it in. It's got a higher rating at the moment with 4.19, but still not a bunch of reviews. So yeah, I think Hera is probably going to be the one that makes it in, but we'll see. Next, another book that is a shoo-in to go in. This is the second book in a series. The first one performed pretty damn well, and it's an established fantasy author. And that is The Books That Broke the World by Mark Lawrence. I haven't read this one yet. It's actually a lot thinner than the first book, which is a surprise. I've not heard many people talking about this, but I know people really do love the first book in the series. And it is currently set at a 4.08 rating on Goodreads, so I think it's probably going to be in here. Next, we have a book that could either be in the fantasy section or it could get moved to the historical section. I'm not quite sure, and that is The Warm Hands of Ghosts. This is, I don't really know a lot about this. I've just seen it around a lot, basically. I know it's historical fantasy set in like a World War kind of time period. I think it's got stuff to do with violins, but I don't remember much else about it. But I think it's been quite popular, and it's got a 4.01 rating, so I'm expecting to see it, if not in the fantasy, then in the historical section. Next, we have The Tainted Cup. That is set at 4.32, which is very high. I don't remember what it's about, so I'm going to go check that now. Right, so this is a fantasy mystery series. For some reason, I thought it was Romantasy, but it's really not. It's by someone called Robert Jackson Bennett. It's got a reasonably good number of reviews. And yeah, it's a murder mystery, basically. And it does sound really good. I have absolutely no reason why I haven't got to this yet. I just haven't. But it is definitely something I'm interested in. It's got a high rating, so I think it's probably going to show up on here. One that I don't know if it deserves to be on here, but I think it probably will anyway, unless the rating really drastically goes down, is Queen Bee by Juno Dawson. This is her prologue book to Her Majesty's Royal Coven. I think if not one or both of the previous books in that series have made it on here before. I personally didn't really enjoy this one. I thought it was very weak. It's currently sat at a rating of 3.73, so it could go either way, basically. I feel like a lot of people have picked this up recently, so I don't know. This could make it, it might not make it, I'm not sure. Just realised there's another book that I have totally just remembered now because I'm talking about witches, and that is whatever is the new Deborah Harkness book in like her Discovery of Witches series. This book, I'll put down below exactly what rating it's currently sat at on Goodreads, but that's probably gonna that is definitely gonna show up either in fantasy or in romantasy. I'm not sure where it lies. I think romantasy, because I know it's very romance heavy, but I'm not entirely sure. But I think that one is definitely going to also be in the list. Okay, next, a book that isn't actually out yet. It's coming out on October the 24th, so it will fall in within that guidelines. But it's an established series. It's the third book in a series by John Gwynne, I think his name is, and it's The Fury of the Gods. This is an epic fantasy. I've heard a lot of people talking about this series. A lot of people really love the first book, and it's currently sat at a 4.6, which doesn't surprise me because books often rate higher before they're released. So that could drop, it could stay, I don't know. It's probably going to drop a little bit, but I think it's an anticipated book that I think has a good chance of making it into the list. Right, next we have a chonker, and this is a book that is definitely, again, a possibility for winning the whole category. It's definitely going to be in at least the top 10. And it's Empire of the Damned by J. Kristoff. I was dubious at first with this one because I thought maybe this should go in the horror category because it is about vampires, but it's ranked higher as fantasy in Goodreads. So I think it's probably going to get put in the fantasy category. I don't remember where Empire of the Vampire originally sat. I'm going to check actually because I'm curious, because I think that might actually give us a bit of a guideline as to where this will be and how high it will rank. But I know it's got an awful lot of hype and it's been out for a quick few months now and it's still sat at a 4.57. This is, I believe, the highest on the list. So this is definitely going to be on at least one of the categories. It has a whole chance of sweeping it, quite honestly. Okay, so I'm looking, and strangely enough, Empire of the Vampire, which originally came out in 2021, never got put in the Goodreads Awards. It's still at a 4.35, so I'm not sure why it didn't fit. But again, fantasy is its highest ranking. So yeah, I do think Empire of the Damned, though, has a good chance of being in it this time. Okay, next we have another book that is not quite out yet or is just about to come out, I believe. I'm not quite sure of the dates, but it's Academy of Liars. I forgot the author. I don't want to say Alexis Henderson. I'll put here exactly what the author is if I'm wrong. And it is one that could actually be in the horror category. I'm not sure. It's fantasy or it's horror. I'm really not sure, but I think it's like a dark academia, more horror, I think, than fantasy, but I've seen fantasy weighted higher, so I don't know. It's currently sat at a 3.66, so I don't know how that's going to go in terms of ratings, but I think it's probably going to show up if it doesn't go below that 3.5. Next, we have another sequel. We have Vilest Things, which is the Chloe Gong sequel to, I think it's Immortal Longings, which is the Antony and Cleopatra book, and it's currently, like, I didn't actually think many people liked the sequel, but it is currently sat at a 4.06, so it's actually quite high. I know it hasn't been out that long, but that's a pretty decent rating, so I think it could be in here. Next, T. Kingfisher. I think she's only had one book out this year that could possibly go into the awards, and it's a fantasy called A Sorceress Comes to Call. It's currently sat at a 4.18. I think it's probably going to be in here. Next, we have, I think it's the final book in a very highly rated, anticipated series by Sarah El Arifi, and that is The Ending Fire. It's currently sat at a 4.24. I think it's probably going to make it at least into the top 10, quite honestly. We have another book that I was hesitant about putting this in here, but the other book by this author performed really well, and that is The Goddess of the River by Vaishnavi Patel. I haven't read this yet. I've not heard many people talking about it, but her book Kaikie did really well when it was in the original award, so I think people are like anticipating this one. Basically, it's Indian mythology retelling. It's currently set at a 3.84, so it's not too bad. I think it's probably going to make it in here. Right, last two for the fantasy category. I do have a copy of this one. I don't know where it is in my house, so you just got to put a picture. It's The God of the Gumiho. Not one I would have necessarily thought would have made it onto this list, quite honestly, but it's had special editions. I think it's been reasonably popular. It's kind of like an urban fantasy romance kind of thing. It's currently set at a 4.1, and that is why it's on this list, because that rating is higher than I thought it was going to be. So that is on the list as well. And then the last one is the new Meg Schaefer book, The Lost Story. She did really well last year in terms of her debut book, The Wishing Game, being in the fiction category. This one is pure fantasy, I believe. So I wanted to put it in fiction again, but I think it has to go in the fantasy category, but it's not performing great. It's at a 3.87, and that could go down. It's only just come out, so I don't know if it's actually going to make it into this list or not. I've heard no one talking about it, which is a surprise because I heard so many people loved The Wishing Game. So I really thought there was going to be more hype around her new book, but I guess not. So we'll see. It may or it may not make it in here. In terms of what I think is going to be in like the top 10 or so, you already know, I think the winner is either going to be the new TJ Klune book or it's going to be Empire of the Damned. So those two definitely. In terms of what else I think is going to make it into the top 10, I think The Familiar is going to be there. Ooh, Ending Fire, I think, is definitely going to be there. I want to say Tainted Cup, actually, I think might make it up there. Emily Wilde, I think, will definitely be there. I don't know. This is where it gets tricky. Sunbringer, maybe? Violet Things might make it up there. Queen Bee might make it up there purely because people might vote because it's Juno Dawson and they haven't read it yet, but they've read her other books, which are great. Oh God, I don't know. For my final one, let's go Warm Hands of Ghosts. I think that one probably is going to be top 10. So yeah, that is my predictions for the fantasy category. So next, let us go into the horror category. This is one that I have a reasonable amount of predictions for. Again, there is also the tendency though with horror, I found, for there to be some crossover with mystery and thriller. And if any of them are like actually kind of more YA, I'm not really sure. So these are my tentative horror picks. These may shift. Same with mystery and thriller when I get to it. Some of those might end up being in horror instead. So I have 19 picks for the horror category. I did have slightly more, but when I've checked just today where their ratings are currently set at, and they ain't doing well. So I don't think those ones are going to make it. So I'll start with what I think is probably going to be the obvious winner, because it's a case of established author is likely going to get voted for. I think Stephen King's You Like It Darker is probably going to end up being a winner, although I'd like to see some of these other books there instead. It's currently sat at a 4.29. It's been out a couple of months. I don't think that rating is going to shift. I think it is the highest rating on here. Ooh, one is very close actually. But yeah, it's the highest, not quite the highest rating actually. But yeah, it's high. It's Stephen King. I think it's definitely going to be the winner, but I'd like to see someone else give it a run for its money. Okay, next we have Diavola. This is sat at a 3.9. I'm not going to go into too much detail about these because I've actually not read many of them. I've read a lot of horror this year. I've not read much recent horror. So this is just stuff that I've seen around, so I don't really have much in the way of my own personal preferences for this right now. At Diavola, I've seen it around a lot. I believe it's a modern day haunting kind of thing. Yeah, good rating. It's probably going to be on here. One that I actually do have a physical copy of. I have like 4 of these in physical copies, so not very many. But it is Julia Armfield's latest book, Private Rights. She wrote Our Wives Under the Sea. It's currently sat at a 3.9. It could also be in the sci-fi category. It's the only thing that's throwing me off. I don't know where it's going to sit. But I'm tentatively putting it in the horror category because I think that is what Julia Armfield is most known for. So yeah, I don't think it's going to place high, unfortunately, but I think it will hopefully be in here at least. Then we have The Woods All Black. It's a horror novella, I believe, currently sat at a 3.78. Next, one that I didn't enjoy very much, but it's Botanical Daughter by Noah Medlock. I think this is a debut. It's currently sat at a 3.7. I don't know, I personally didn't love it, but I think a lot of people have been reading it, and it's gotten a lot of hype, I think, in the horror community, so it could be in here. Next, we have Murder Road by Simone St. James, currently sat at a 3.71. Heard mixed reviews. I think she's an established horror author, so I think there's a good chance that she's going to be in here, plus like it did get, as you can see, a special edition from Evernight, so it could be in here, I don't know. Next, we have a book that I have read and I quite liked, and it's Bury Your Gaze by Chuck Tingle. It's currently, I think, got the second highest rating in here at a 4.24. I really enjoyed it. It's kind of like a sci-fi horror, a bit of a satire on the world of Hollywood and AI. I thought it was great. Do I think it's the winner? For me personally, maybe not. I think I've read better things, and there's also just so much on this list that I'm more interested in. But I think it's definitely a shoo-in, probably for the top 10. Speaking of what could be a shoo-in for the top 10, and I think maybe one of the few books that could give Stephen King a run for his money, is The Angel of Indian Lake. I think this is by Stephen Graham Jones. This is, I don't know if it's the end of a trilogy, but it's the 3rd book in his series. It's currently set at a 4.18, very established author, well-loved series. The first book is called My Heart is a Chainsaw. I think it's called the Indian Lake series. I don't remember, but yeah, I think it's likely to get high ratings. Oh, and this is where I totally contradict myself, because Teeth Kingfisher actually did come out of another book this year, and it's in the horror category. It is a sequel though, so I don't know how well it could go either way, basically. It's called What Feasts at Night. It's the sequel to whatever this book is here. I don't remember it. Currently set at 3.86. I don't know. Her book last year did really well in the horror ranking, but I've not heard many people say they like this one, so I don't know where it's going to sit right now. Next, I Was a Teenage Slasher. This has been fairly popular, I think, but it's only sat at a 3.64, so I don't know where it's going to end up, to be honest. But as I said, spooky season, I think a lot of people are going to be reading horror at the moment, so we'll see. Next, we have Incidents Around the House, currently sat at 3.76. This is kind of like a haunted house kind of thing. He's been in here before. I think he's quite popular. I think it's definitely going to be in this list. Then we have a book that I think is probably one of the most hyped in this category. It's getting a film soon. I think it's also going to be in the top 10. Maybe could give Stephen King a run for his money. I don't know, but it's We Used to Live Here. This is a haunted house story. I've heard nothing but good things about it from everybody, basically. I thought the rating would be a little bit higher, to be honest, because I thought it'd be in the 4s. But it's a high 3, so yeah, I don't know yet, we'll see, but I think it's definitely going to be in the top 20, probably the top 10. Next we have My Darling Dreadful Thing, currently set at a 3.88, don't know a whole lot about this. I think it might be queer, but I keep seeing it around, so I feel like it belongs in this list. But then we have Rachel Harrison's book So Thirsty, currently sat at a 3.71. She's been in here before, I think. She's wrote books like Cackle. She's pretty popular, I think, so I think she'll be in here. Then we have a book that is one where it could actually be in the fantasy category. I'm not entirely sure in terms of the weighting, but it's Someone You Can Build a Nest In, currently sat at a 4.06. I think this has been well loved by a lot of people that have read it. It's queer as well, which I also love. It's about a monster lady who falls in love with a human lady, and it gets dark and messy, I think. I think it is veering more in the horror, I think, than fantasy, but I could be surprised. Next, we have another author who has historically been in the horror Goodreads Awards before. Forgotten her name, but it's this person, and it's Lucy Undying. This has only just come out. This is probably the book I'm most interested in hers. Kirsten White, there we go, it's by Kirsten White. This is about Lucy from Dracula, and it's a modern day horror story, so it's not doing great in terms of the ratings, 3.68, but I think just by reputation alone with the author, this book is going to make it into the list. We have a fairly new release called Rest Stop. I think this is the one about the guy that gets stuck in the underground, and he's the only one there, but there's creepy things happening. Currently sat at a 4.65. It's only just come out, I think, so that rating could change, but that's a pretty damn good rating. Then we have American Rapture, currently sat at a 4.43. I think this is like a religious-y, grotesque-y sort of horror. I don't know if it's one I actually want to read, but it's got a good rating, so I think it could make it in here. And then finally, we have Avert Your Eyes If You Don't Like Eyes, because I have a special edition cover which is quite gory. We have The Eyes Are the Best Part by Monica Kim. This has had a lot of hype. It's sat at a 3.89. I think it's probably going to make it in here because it's just been hearing about it all year, basically. So in terms of the books that I think I've just missed out, Bloom was a book that I really thought was going to be in here, but I didn't realise it actually came out in October last year, so that just misses out. And then the two books that were on my potential list that have unfortunately had a big rating drop, so I don't think they're going to make it anymore, is Graveyard Shift by Emil Rio. It's currently sat at a 3.39, which I'm really surprised about. I know people love her previous book, I think If We Were Villains, is it? And people were really anticipating this, but it doesn't sound like it's doing well, unfortunately. I'm actually waiting for my copy to come in at the library, so I guess I'll find out soon myself. And the other book that I don't think is going to make it is The House of Last Resort by Christopher Golden. It's currently sat at 3.19, so I think it's out of the running. I have quite a few for the YA fantasy and I believe the mystery thriller category. So let's move on to a short category first, and that is sci-fi. I am honestly kind of out of the loop with what's come out in sci-fi this year. I haven't really heard what is popular, so I've only got a couple of suggestions really for this one in terms of my predictions. So we have Anibot. This is about a love robot. The whole story is about her. I've heard really good things about it. Currently at 3.83. So yeah, I think it's going to be in there. The Ministry of Time. This has had a whole load of hype, I think, and a lot of publicity around it, particularly by Waterstones. but it's currently set at a 3.62, so I don't know how that's going to turn out. Another book, which is the only book on this list that I have read, I've heard no one talking about it, but it's sat at a rating that I think could make it be in the list, so I'm just going to throw it out there as a possible prediction. 13 Ways to Kill Lulubella Rock. I love this book so much. This is about clones, and it's about one clone who is sent out to assassinate all the other clones of this famous movie star. It's so good. I love it so much. I'd love to see it on here, but I don't know. I don't think it's really hit as well as other books may have, unfortunately. Absolution by Jeff Vandermeer. Everyone was kind of surprised that he's brought out another book in the Southern Reaches series, I think it's called. It's What Annihilation, the series that came from that originally. I don't know if it's really popular, but I know Annihilation is, so I think it's probably going to be in here. 3.98 rating. Beautyland, sat at a 4.14. I don't know a whole lot about this, to be honest, but it is, I believe, the highest rating on here, so it's probably going to make it in. Then we have The Other Valley by 3.89. This one actually sounds quite interesting. One I do want to check out, could be in here. Stardust Grail is another one that I think is quite interesting, currently sat at 3.74. And then finally, we have two books by Adrian Tchaikovsky that came out this year. I don't know which is going to make it on. They're actually sat at exactly the same rating on Goodreads. They're both a 4.06. So we have Alien Clay and Service Model. I think Alien Clay is probably the one that might get picked. But I guess you could probably have both, honestly. So I don't know. This could have both of his books in here. But yeah, that's all I have for the sci-fi. I'm just really out of the loop with it, honestly. I want to love sci-fi, and I just find it really hard to find ones I like personally. I'm still in my sci-fi discovery journey. So yeah, I don't have a lot to add for this, really. I thought there might be like a new Anne Leckie book, but there hasn't been really, so yeah. Okay, let's run through a couple of the other categories that I don't have very much predictions for. I have literally one prediction for the non-fiction category, and it's The Age of Magical Overthinking. It's currently set at 3.52, so I could be way off base, but it's basically the only one that I've heard about. So yeah, that's all I've got for that one. Fiction category, I'm never really good at this. It's usually whatever is contemporary and doesn't fit into romance, I suspect. Usually literary fiction. Blue Sisters, currently set at 4.14. That's most likely going to be in here. It may win. We have Martyr, which is currently set at a 4.24. The Husbands, I think, could be in here, but it's a lower rating than I kind of was expecting to see it in. It's only a 3.52. So yeah, I thought people really loved it, but I guess not. And then finally, we have Sally Rooney's new book, Intermezzo, currently set at a 4.31, but it's only just come out. That's all I got for the fiction category, basically. I really don't have a lot for it at all. YA fiction, however, I'm a little bit better at. So I still don't have loads, but I have 6 books prediction-wise for this one. I've noticed it's been a big trend for mystery thrillers to be in the YA fiction category, and we usually do tend to get a good amount of LGBTQ romances in there too, which I like to see. So I haven't got much of the latter, unfortunately, because I just don't think I've been really aware of what's coming out. But I do think that at least, I think there's 2 books that possibly, in fact no, I think there's 3 books that are potentially going to win the category, and that is these first 3 I'm going to talk about. We have Where Sleeping Girls Lie, currently set at a 4.05. Same author of Ace of Spades, which I think is really beloved. This is a dark academia mystery kind of thing. There may be a little bit of fantasy in it, I'm not sure. So I put it in the fiction category, but I could be wrong. It may actually be in the fantasy category, but I do think it's fiction. Then we have Lex Croucher's new book, Not for the Faint of Heart. I think she's generally done quite well in this category. It's currently sat at a 4.03. I believe not this book, but her previous book, which I actually have. Hang on. Because I'm going to start reading it any day now. When an Art and Not in Love just won, I think, like this big YA award thing, which is her previous book. So I think that has probably given her a little bit more visibility. And her new book, I think, is kind of in that like more historical category like that one. So I think it's probably going to do well. Then we have the reappearance of Rachel Price. I think this is Holly Jackson, who has always done well in this. Currently is the highest rated at a 4.12. I think it's probably going to win. I think she won last year, actually. I'm trying to remember because it was 5 Survive. I think 5 Survive won the YA category last year. Then we have Jennifer Lynn Barnes. She's often done well in here. She has the last book in the Inheritance games, I think, came out this year. The Grandest Game, currently at a 3.99. It's probably going to be in here. Then we have one more, which I think is by, I want to say Karen McManus, who I think has done well in here previously, and that is Such Charming Liars. Currently sat at a 3.79. It's another mystery thriller kind of thing. And then finally, I have one book, which is a romance, I believe, and that is When Harry Was There, currently sat at a 3.89. So reasonably high. I feel like there's definitely been a lot that have come out. I'm probably reading some of them, to be honest, because I'm doing a lot of Yalc authors right now, but nothing's really been sticking out for me. So I'm just going to leave it at that for now. And yeah, honestly, if you know any others, feel free to put it in the comments because I'm genuinely curious. Because yeah, YA fiction, I read a lot of YA fantasy, but fiction, not so much. So I'd be intrigued to see what is kind of out there for it, basically. Other small sections that I've looked at. Memoir. I'm not huge on knowing memoirs coming out. I've just listed some of the big ones that I think are probably going to be in here. So we have Sociopath, currently sat at a 3.82. I think it's probably going to be in the top 10. We have Want, which is Gillian Anderson. Is that her name? The lady from X-Files. Her book, which is a bunch of like anonymous sexual fantasies that she's gathered into an anthology. Currently sat at a 3.84. And then we have Knife by Salman Rushdie, a very acclaimed author. Currently, I think the highest rating I've got on here. No, it isn't actually, but I think the other two are new releases. But it's sat at a 4.08. Then we have The House of Hidden Meanings. This is RuPaul Charles's biography. I've not really heard much about it, to be honest. But I think just purely because it's RuPaul and celebrity memoirs do well, it might end up in this list. Currently sat at a 3.83. Then we have My Side of the River. I don't recall much about this one, but I think it's not a celebrity memoir from what I remember. Currently sat at a 3.78. Then we have one that I would like to see on here because I've heard it's really good, but it's not got a good rating. It's only at a 3.54. That is Men Have Called Her Crazy. It sounds like my kind of thing, honestly. So it could make it in here. I don't know. And then we have two that I had honestly not really heard of until literally today when I was doing some last minute checks. We have Bits and Pieces, which I think is Whoopi Goldberg's memoir. She has a memoir out. Who knew? But currently sat at a 4.33. And then we have The Third Gilmore Girl, which is the memoir of one of the, I think, someone in the Gilmore Girls. I've never seen it. I know loads of people love it. So I think it's probably going to get high because of that, basically. It's currently at a 4.5, which is the highest rating, which I'm not surprised about. So we have one more small category then, so let's get that out of the way. And then the final categories I actually have a decent number for, which is very funny because one of those is romance, and I don't read romance. But I follow a lot of people that read romance, so I feel like I've kind of got a lot on my radar that I've heard about, even if I don't read them myself. But finally, we have the historical category. I've only got 5 books for this. And the thing with historical is that often it could so easily get put into fiction category. So, I don't know. But we have The Women by Kristen Hanna, I think. So it's a very established author. I think she wrote The Nightingale. It's, I believe, the highest rating on here at a 4.63. Then we have James by, I think it's Percival Everett. This is a take on Tom Sawyer Huckleberry Finn book following the Black slave Jim. Currently sat at a 4.53 and it's one of the Booker Prize shortlist. So I do think it's going to do quite well in here. Side note, all of the Booker shortlist could actually be in the fiction category, but I really don't know. Because I recently read, I think I've only read one book from it, which was Orbital, which I really liked. But I also don't know if that fits into being fiction or sci-fi because it wasn't really like science fiction. It was just set in space. So yeah, I don't know. Those could also be in here. Then we have All the Colours of the Dark, currently at a 4.4. So a very good rating, but it's also listed as a mystery. So I don't know if it's going to be historical or it's going to be mystery, but I think we have so much in mystery already. It's probably going to be an historical. Then we have By Any Other Name, 4.15 rating. And then finally we have The Frozen River, which is a 4.42 rating. I'll be honest, I don't really know much about these. Historical fiction is not really my kind of thing, unless it's fantasy historical. So yeah, I don't know a whole lot about these. I am not even going to attempt to say what could be the winner, but I think The Women probably has a good chance. Okay, on to the last categories. I have 4 left that I'm going to go over, that I've actually put quite a lot of predictions into. So we have mystery, romance, YA fantasy, and romantasy. So let us do romance first, because it's the one that I honestly will have no opinions on. To be honest, I have read probably none of these. I'm probably not going to even pretend that I'm gonna read any of these, but I think they're probably going to be in here. So this is all for all you people who love their romance books. Expect these to likely be in the list. I have 16 predictions for this one. For the very first book, and what is probably going to be the winner, to be honest, because she won last year and she's usually always at least in the top 5, I think, is Emily Henry's new book, Funny Story. It's sat at a 4.25. Probably gonna win. Then we have Not in Love. It's only at a 3.66, which I'm really surprised about because it's Ali Hazelwood's latest book, and I know she generally does really well, but I think her other book, Bride, is actually going to do a lot better in these awards than her latest book. I've heard no one talking about this, so yeah, a bit of a surprise really, but I don't think it's doing well for her in this category. Then we have Just for the Summer, which is a 4.4. I think this is Abby Jimenez, who is often in these category. Then we have The Paradise Problem, which I think is Christina Lauren. Can you see I've tried to memorize these and I haven't? I've literally only got a book title and a rating down here in my spreadsheet. But I've heard a lot of people say they really like this one. So yeah, I think that one's gonna be in the top 10. Fangirl Down, 3.88 rating. The Rule Book, to separate words, rule book, don't make my mistake and think they're the same word and then get really confused when you're not finding the right book. That is a 3.91. There's an awful lot of sports romance books, I've got to say, that have come out recently. Probably one of the few in this list that I'm actually interested in reading. A Love Song for Ricky Wilde. This is set at a 4.04. I've just heard good things about this one, basically. Then we have one that actually has a touch of fantasy to it, and that's A Novel Love Story, currently set at a 3.69. I think it was a book of the month, but I could be wrong. But basically this is about someone that I believe goes into a book. So yeah, it sounds interesting, but I've heard mixed things about it. Then we have a cowboy romance, Swift and Saddled, 3.97 rating. I realise there's another one here that I feel like should have been in here, and I think I've maybe put it in the wrong category, because Lever and Lock I think should probably have been in here, but I can't find it now. So yeah, Lever and Lock is also one that should probably be in here. Then we have Daydream. This is a 4.05 rating. Business Casual, I think this is quite a popular series. If it's the one I'm thinking of, it's the Love Lark Farm series. That's the only reason it's in here. It's set at 4.22 at the moment. Not Another Love Song. This is Julie Soto, I believe, who has generally always done quite well. I always love the covers on her books, but I suspect I won't like the books themselves. 4.15 rating. Then we have The Au Pair Affair. I think this is just down to the author being popular that it's going to make it on here. 3.67 rating. The next one I think has got a really high rating as well, and that's The Rom-Commers. Probably going to make it to the top 10. And then we have Play Along, which is a 4.51, and finally The Dixon Rule at a 4.19. So yeah, that was a very breezy predictions of all the romance books, because it's sadly not my genre. Okay, moving into YA fantasy, just because I think this is probably the one I have not as much of compared to romantasy and mystery thriller. Okay, on to the YA fantasy category. I only have a couple of these physical, but more than some of the other genres at least. I also have like 24 predictions for this one. There is a lot of fantasy that I thought was adult and it turns out it's YA, which is how I got tripped up last year. So I have quite a few predictions. I don't really know how many are going to make it on. But let's start off with one that I think performed quite well last year, and that is a sequel to Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross, Ruthless Vows. This is currently set at a 4.04. I love this book. The only thing that may stop it from coming in here is that it came out quite a while ago. It came out in like December last year, so I think people may have forgotten it by now. So I think that may mean it performs kind of poorly, but I guess we'll see. This is one of those, I would like this book to be on here, but I don't think it will. And that is My Throat is an Open Grave by Tori Bobolino. It's currently sat at a 3.83, so fairly respectable, but I just haven't seen many people talking about it, unfortunately. But I'd love to see it on this list because I thought it was really good. Then we have Crystal Sutherland's book. I think her other book, House of Hollow, I want to say, may have made it into the Goodreads Awards before. I can't remember. This is her latest book. It did get a special edition by Evernight, so you can see this is how it looks like normally. But I think it's had fairly good reviews. It's a YA story about these witches and bringing back the dead, and it sounds really good. I am getting to it very soon. It's currently at a 4.1, so I think it's likely to be in here. Then we have Holly Black's latest book, which I think is in the Cruel Prince series or something. It's called The Prisoner's Throne. I've neglected to work out what the rating is for this one, so it's this. It's probably going to do quite well. Holly Black usually does in the YA fantasy category. Then we have a book which I actually really thought was going to be in Romantasy, but it is actually YA. And I think it has a good chance. I don't know, I want to say it has a good chance of winning, but I'm not entirely sure. I just know that a lot of people have really liked it, and it's The Crimson Moth, also known as The Headless Hunter, I think if you're in America. It's currently at a 4.21, which is pretty damn good. So yeah, I did think it was Romantasy, but it is YA, so it's probably going to more likely be in this category instead. Then we have the final one that I actually own, which is A Tempest of Tea by Hafsa Faisal. It's not as high a rating as I really thought it was going to be, which is kind of a surprise. It's a 3.56, and I really thought it was going to be higher, so this could drop off before we even get to the nomination thing, but I think people really have liked this from what I've heard. This is a historical urban fantasy about blood dens, and I think there's a heist, and it just sounds like a really good time, to be honest. It did come out a little while ago. I think it came out in March, so I don't know if that means like the hype for it is kind of dulled down a little bit. Then we have a book that I personally just want to see in here, even if like it isn't going to make it. It's one that I think also could have really gone in the sci-fi category, but I think unfortunately it does class as YA. And that is the sequel to The Dark Between Us, The Brightness Between Us by, I think, Elliot Scrafer. I really love the first book in this series. The new book is only just released, so it's currently sitting at a very respectable 4.59, but I think we're going to have to wait a bit to see how those ratings change, because I say it's either just come out or it's not quite come out when I'm recording this. But I personally am really excited for this one. Then we have a new book in a series by, I think, Aidan Thomas. It's called Celestial Monsters. It's sat at 4.34. I think it's going to do pretty well. I'm pretty sure the Sunbearer Trials, which I think is the first book in this series, did pretty well. But then we have a book that I'm tentatively putting on this list, even though it's not out yet, but I know it's going to do well. And that is the new kind of book in the Caraval series by Stephanie Garber. It's the only book she's got out, so this is her only potential for being on these awards, basically. I can't remember when it's coming out, but it is before the cutoff point. Currently at a 4.55. I believe it's short story set in the world, but like she's always done well statistically in the Goodreads Awards, and I think just purely because it's Caraval and it's really popular, it's probably going to make it in here. Okay, next we have a book that I think I may have done my writing wrong when I wrote this up, so I may have to skip over it. I've written it down as that it's called The End Controls All. I don't think that's actually what it's called because I can't find it when I look up in Goodreads, but it is sat at a 4.21. I will try and do some research when I get to editing mode and put what the book actually is, but it's very high rated, so it's probably going to make it on here. I want to say it's probably a fantasy romance kind of thing, just from the title, but we'll see. Next, we have a book that has been getting a lot of hype, but it's not sat at a good rating, and I don't think it's actually even quite out yet, so I'm a little bit worried for that. It's Until We Shatter, currently sat at a 3.65. It is sapphic, I believe, but honestly not much about it has really appealed to me, so yeah. Next we have another book that isn't out yet, but I think is just going to make it in time for the cutoff point, and that is the sequel to What the River Knows by, I want to say, Isabel Ibanez, I think is her name. It's called Where the Library Hides. It's currently set at 4.33. I think the first book was pretty well liked, so I think the second book definitely has potential to make it onto this list once it comes out, unless it comes out and it's a real stinker. Next, a book I have actually read on this list, Where the Dark Stands Still. Really enjoyed this one actually. It's a very sweet kind of fantasy with Polish roots, which was really nice to see. It's currently set at a 4.1. I think it's probably going to make it to maybe the top 10. Then we have another book which rating has dropped drastically, which I'm kind of surprised about. It's one that I think had a lot of hype when it came out, and then I've heard nothing about it ever since, and that is A Fragile Enchantment. It's currently set at a 3.52. It's like a Regency era fantasy about a magical seamstress basically making a dress for a wedding. It sounds quite good actually, but like maybe a little too cutesy maybe is the word, so maybe it just hasn't been doing well because of that. I'm not entirely sure. Then we have a book that honestly I hadn't really heard of before I was doing my last checks today, and it just kept showing up in recommendations whenever I was looking at the other books, so I figured I should probably put it in here, and it's The Temptation of Magic. It's set at a 3.94. I don't really know a lot about it, but it keeps showing up. It's got a lot of ratings and reviews, so I think it may show up in this list. I don't know. Then we have Beneath These Cursed Stars. I think this is a sequel. Yes, this is a sequel to the These Hollow Vows series. This is the third book in the series. Currently set at a 3.89. I think just because it's an established series, it's probably going to do quite well. Only for that reason, really, not because of its rating. I found the book that I was confused about. It's actually called The Darkness Within Us by Trisha Levenseller, 3.98 rating. It's a sequel to The Shadows Between Us, which I think also did reasonably well. Came out in 2020, was a Goodreads Choice Award nominee at the time. So yeah, I think that one is probably definitely going to be in there for that reason. Then we've got Air, which is currently sat at a 4.545. Don't know a whole lot about it, but I think the author is quite established. Then we have A Song to Drown Rivers, currently set at a 4.06. Next one I'm not sure about, to be honest. It's Kaylin Byron's most recent book, I believe. She's sometimes been in these awards before, I think, and it's her Snow White retelling called Sleep Like Death. It's only got a 3.53 rating, so I'm not sure if it's going to make it, but I think there's a possibility it could make it. We got another one that's had a special edition. This is Darker by 4, currently got a really good rating at 4.07, so I think it could make it in here. And then the last two are ones that I'm not entirely sure about, but I just kind of keep seeing them around, so I'm just going to put them in here as additional predictions, really. And that is The Bell Witches, which is currently sat at a 3.78. I had one more as well that I want to check because I don't know if I've got the writing down. I've got it down as The Mirror of Beats, which I think probably is supposed to be Beast. So I'm going to just check that, but it's got a 4.23 rating. I was right, it was The Mirror of Beasts by Alexandra Bracken. This is the sequel to the King Arthur book that came out last year, Silver and the Bone. It was in the category last year. It's got a pretty good rating and it is already out, so, but not a lot of reviews, to be honest, so I don't know, but it could be in here. Okay, on to the category which I've probably put the most predictions on, to be honest. I have 25 predictions for this. I also realised that one of the ones that I said in YA Fantasy actually should have been in this one instead, which was The Darkness Within Us. So yeah, ignore it from that category, I guess. Here we go. In terms of the books that I think are going to be in the Romantasy category, we have, first and foremost, A Fate Inked in Blood. This is the Viking story, which I think has been very popular, to be honest. It's currently set at a 3.97. I think it's going to be in the top 10, most likely. Then we have one that unfortunately I didn't really like that much, but I know it's still got a lot of people that love it, and it is the latest Dragon Romantasy, When the Moon Hatched by Sarah A. Parker. Currently sat at a 4.11. I think this is going to do pretty well, to be honest, for itself. Then we have another book, which I think has only got famous because it's one of like the TikTok famous kind of books, and that is Quicksilver. It's currently sat at a ridiculous 4.45 rating, and I think it has been out for a couple of months. So I think this is definitely a shoo-in for the top 10 at this point in time. Then we have, of course, because I can't not mention it, Sarah J. Maas's newest book, House of Flames and Shadows. This is the third and I believe final book in her Crescent City series. I've heard mixed things about it, but it's Sarah J Maas. She usually always wins when she's in this sort of category, and it's still got a rating of 4.21, so I think it definitely has a really good chance to win. The only thing that I think could possibly beat it is A Fate Inked in Blood, just because of popularity. And then there was another book that I thought could beat it, but looking at my stats for it, it's not doing so well in terms of ratings, so I don't know if it's going to make it or not. In fact, let's just talk about that one right now, and that is Spaybound by Sarah L. Arifi. This is her elven, fae kind of fantasy that she's come out with this year. It's been really popular. It's had a bunch of special editions, but it's not sitting as high as I thought it was going to be in terms of rating. It's only a 3.6, so I really thought this could have been the winner, but I don't know. I don't think this is going to beat Sarah J Maas at this rate. Then we have Born of Blood and Ash. I believe this is Jennifer L. Armentroux's latest book. I know nothing about it. I just know she wrote a ton of books that are all romantasy. It's currently a 4.15. I think this is like the fourth or fifth book in the series. I don't know. So yeah, that's definitely going to be in here. She was in there like 3 times last year, but I believe she's only had 1 book out this year, but I could be completely wrong because she is such a prolific writer. The Hemlock Queen, I think this has either just come out or it's about to come out. This is a sequel to The Foxglove King, which was in the awards last year and did fairly well, I think. It's a 3.87. It's definitely going to be in here. Then we have a book which isn't actually out yet, but I think it's showing last year, and that it is going to come out within the nomination period means it's probably going to make it into this list. And that is Kerry Maniscalco's Throne of Secrets, sequel to Throne of the Falling, which I really loved, actually. Like, I gave this one a chance and I loved it. 4.39 rating at current. We'll see how it goes once it actually comes out, I guess. Then we've got Scarlett St. Clair's latest book, who writes the Hades Persephone series. Touch of Chaos, this one is called. It's at 3.95 rating at the moment. Then we have Wisteria, which has only just come out, I believe. I think this is the sequel to, I want to say Belladonna, but I really don't remember. It's a highly anticipated sequel though, basically. 4.32 rating. Then we have one that's come out fairly recently. So, the thing is that last year, as you saw recently, there was literally only white straight romances in the romantasy category. I'm throwing in a couple of LGBT ones that I'd love to see in here, and this is one of them. This is A Dark and Drowning Tide by Alison Saft. It's got a 3.81 rating. Fairly new release. It's a dark academia sapphic story. It could make it, I don't know. It's had a reasonable amount of hype, I think. Then we've also got The Wren and the Holly Library. This has had a bunch of special editions. It's currently sat at a 3.78. In fact, the next book is possibly one of the few that could topple Sarah J Maas, because it's by Ali Hazelwood, and that is Bride. Currently sat at a 4.03. It's been out for a good while at this point. This is like the werewolf vampire romance. It could win, potentially. I think it's got that crossover thing between an established romance author also doing fantasy. And I think I have heard good things about it. So yeah, I think there's a possibility there of it doing well. Next, we have more of a cozy fantasy romance. I don't know if it's going to be popular enough. I think it's only just come out, but it does have a 4.09 rating, and it's Rewitched. I've heard a lot of like good things said about this. I don't know if it's maybe just like too soft and cozy of a fantasy though for it to make it. I almost put it in fantasy category, actually. I feel like the trend is more towards like dark, sexy romances and romantasy, but I put it in here just in case. But then we have the sequel to what was the runner-up, I believe, in last year's romantasy category, which was Assistant to the Villain, and this is Apprentice to the Villain. Not a series I'm going to be carrying on. I really didn't like Assistant to the Villain, but I think other people definitely did. And it's currently set at a 4.2 rating, so yeah, it's definitely going to be in the romantasy category again. Then we have the second book in the Powerless series, which I think did pretty well when it was in the whatever year it came out. This is Reckless, currently set at a 4.08. Then we've got one that I'm not sure if it's going to make it in or not, but I think it probably like has good reason to be in here. And that is Long Live Evil. It's currently set at a 3.94. This is the one about the woman who accidentally becomes like an evil villain in a fantasy story. And it sounds really good, honestly. This is one I really want to read. And I feel like it hits that kind of like comedy kind of aspect that Apprentice to the Villain kind of hits, that kind of niche, so I feel like it has a good chance. Then we have The Darkness Within Us. This is the one that I thought was in the YA fantasy category. It is classed as young adult, that's why I'm not sure about it. Then we have quite a new release, The Dagger and the Flame, currently sat at a 4.12. It's been getting a reasonable amount of hype, so I think it could possibly make it in. Then we have another one called The Songbird and the Heart of Stone. It's sat at a 4.31. Then another one that I'm just kind of putting in here, hoping it will make it in, but I honestly don't think it will. I think cozy fantasy is not what's going to make it into romantasy, but I put the Phoenix Keep it in anyway, just in case. This may be in fantasy as well, I don't know. It's currently sat at a 3.98. Then we have, I believe, 2 books in the same series, only one of which can make it, obviously, but that is in, I think it's the Guild series, which is the King Midas retelling. Both Gold and Goldfinch came out, I think, and the second one, the Goldfinch, which is the most recent, is the higher rating at a 4.38, so I think it's probably going to be that one that does make it in. Another one, which, again, I don't know if it's too cozy, but we have The Spell Shop by Sarah Beth Durst. This has been doing the round. I think it's quite popular, so it could definitely make it in. Then we have another sequel, which I think did pretty well last year. We have The Undermining of Twilight and Frank, currently set at a 4.12. I think it was Heart and Mercy was the first book in the series, and I think it's been pretty well liked, and I think it was in the Goodreads Awards last year. And then the final one is A Feather So Black, which I think is like a Swan Lake kind of retelling, currently set at a 3.75, has had a bunch of special editions. So yeah, there was one other book that I really thought was going to make it in here, and that was Lore of the Wilds, but it ain't been doing too well. It's currently set at a 3.35, and I've heard a lot of people say they hate it. So yeah, that was like one that I had basically at the start of the year on my predictions list, and yeah, it ain't on there anymore, basically. Okay, here we are at the final category, probably one that for some of you is maybe the most anticipated category, because it is the category of mystery thriller. Not gonna lie, this is primarily based off what I've been seeing around. I have only just started to get into mystery thriller stuff, so I haven't read any of these, I don't think. But they are actually, a lot of them are ones that sound really good, and ones that are kind of like on my radar to read. So the first book is one that could also be in the sci-fi category, and it's not as high a rating as I kind of thought it was going to have, so it might not even make it. But that is The Last Murder at the End of the World. It's currently set at a 3.67. This one has a really cool premise, and it's definitely one that I want to read, but yeah, I don't know if it's going to make it. Then we have, I believe, is Ruth Ware's latest book, One Perfect Couple. Not the best rating, it's a 3.67, but it's Ruth Ware, so it's gonna make it on the list, I imagine. I actually have 2 books by Frida McFadden on this list, and this is the one that I don't know is gonna make it. I think the other one is higher rated, but The Housemaid is Watching could very well make it onto this list. It's the 3rd book in the Housemaid series. The 2nd book won, I think, last year, or it came very high. I can't quite remember anymore, but I think it's enough that the 3rd book is going to make it. I personally wasn't really a big fan of the Housemaid series. It was just kind of like popcorn thriller to me, but I think the 3rd book is going to make it on here just by reputation alone. We've got The Heiress. This is sat at a 3.86. I actually like the sound of this one a lot, to be honest. We Solve Murders, which is the latest by Richard Osman of the Thursday Murder Club, I think it's called. It's been on here before. It's quite a popular series, and this is his most recent book, currently sat at a 4.28. I think it's definitely going to be on here. Could potentially be a shoe-in for the winner, I don't know yet, because he has stiff competition. Next we have Night Watching. This has been in a couple of book clubs, I know. It's not got the best rating at a 3.85, but potentially enough for it to actually still make it on here. Next we have First Lie Wins. This one has got a very good rating at 4.03. Another one that I've been hearing a lot about is Listen for the Lie. This has a 4.12 rating. Next we have, in fact, the next 2 books are both books that I really want to read. One is Home is Where the Bodies Are, which I think has a really cool videotape cover, currently sat at a 3.84, and How to Solve Your Own Murder. which is sat at only a 3.8, but I really like the sound of this one. This sounds like kind of a cozy mystery, and it sounds like a lot of fun, to be honest. Then we have Darling Girls, which is an author who has historically, I think, done pretty well in these awards, currently sat at a 4.03. The God in the Woods, I've also put in here. I don't know if it should maybe, I want to say it could even be an historical or fiction. I'm really not sure, but I think it's probably going to show up somewhere in these awards. It's a book of the month book as well. Currently set at a 4.23, which is really good. And then we have Daughter of Mine, 3.94 rating. Lucy Foley's newest book, The Midnight Feast, is next at a 3.62. Not the highest rating, but I think, again, she's an established mystery thriller author, so I think it's highly likely that she will make it in here. Then we have This Is Why We Lied at a 4.39. Next we have Here One Moment at a 4.17. The Last One at the Wedding is next at a 3.84. This one actually sounds quite interesting to me, to be honest. I think I put another book in here, which is called The Blue Hour, but it's not out yet, and it's not honestly got the best rating already, so yeah, I don't know if that's probably not going to make it, to be honest. And then, of course, we have Riley Sager's latest book, Middle of the Night. It's Riley Sager. It's likely going to make it because it's Riley Sager. In fact, did he win last year's award? I can't remember. He either won or he came like second or third with the House Across the Lake or whatever it was. This is a 3.72. I think even though it's had very mixed reviews, it's going to at least make it into probably the top 10. Then we have Freedom McFadden's other book, which came out earlier in the year. It's still at a 3.93, which is pretty good. It's better than The Housemaid is Watching, so both may even make it on the list, to be honest. And the last two books, we have Kill for Me, Kill for You. I've only heard a little bit about this, but it does sound really interesting, and it's got a 4.19 rating. And then finally, a book that I honestly kind of forgot came out this year, because I thought people had fallen out of love with this series. But it's the latest Finlay Donovan book, which is Where She Goes to Vegas. Finlay Donovan Rolls the Dice. It's at a 3.91. It may make it in, but also it's in that cozy mystery kind of thing that I'm a bit like, I'm not really sure if cozy is kind of doing well or not. But yeah, those are all my predictions then, I guess, for the Goodreads Choice Award. Look forward to when the nominations actually come out. I will definitely be doing a reaction video to when the actual nominations come out, and then again when the awards come out. I'm excited to see how wrong I am, because I was very wrong last year, basically. But yeah, I hope you found this interesting. Maybe it gave you some more books to read. Just put some more things on your radar. Honestly, feel free if you think there's other things that I've like forgotten about or have totally passed me by. Put that down in the comments. You know, I obviously do get things wrong. I don't know everything. Even in my favourite genres, you know, I'm sure I've missed a lot, and I've honestly not read as much of these as I would have liked to have done. I've just been reading a lot of backlist stuff this year, basically, so if you found this interesting, I've got a whole other series where I'm at the moment that I'm doing, where I'm currently reading books from last year's Goodreads Awards, which has been really interesting so far, for sure. And yeah, as always, until the next video, stay safe, stay cozy, and I'll see you next time. Bye!